We did it.
Nice and smooth.
Those who are everybody watching now, which is currently 0, is wondering, you did what? You do this every week. What's the big deal? Not realizing that we forgot. We changed the password for the login and blah blah blah. And we only both just arrived in StreamYard moments. Well, I did, certainly, before this even started. Hello, my name is Steve Jaguar.
And I'm Mike Foster.
And welcome once again to And the thoughts expressed on the show belong to the presenters only and not any employer or sponsor.
Checks out.
All right, good. We did it. And it looks like we have a viewer. Hello, DSO Training. Welcome once again to the show.
And we got a packed show for you right now. So we'll just do the house cleaning and then we'll get into it. So yeah, today we're going to talk about namespaces, security, some cookie and tracking capabilities that are changing. We have another big spender in the list, and I don't want to get too far into it, but SolarWinds WTFs. And we're gonna finish up with not a demo, but kind of a quick run through of Backstage, which is a Spotify project that got released to CNCF into the sandbox. So yeah, looking forward to going through it all. If you're on Twitch, follow us. We'll do this every Friday. Basically, we have another meetup coming up at Kubernetes Security next week on Thursday. So go check that out. And you can find a bunch of information below as well in the About section. Anything I missed, Steve?
Well, we added our plug section at the end. So if we forgot anything at the beginning, we can just throw it at the end. That things we might be doing. You released a very cool blog that we were going to add. That is that in here?
I threw it in the namespaces instead of the other big long one. I put namespaces for security, and I want to talk about hierarchical namespaces.
Good. You've changed it. You've added. Is the original one in there? I'm totally confused now.
Just click the first one.
All right. It's your subject now.
It checks out.
All right. quickly moving to our first exciting topic, which is funnily and egotistically written by Michael.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, don't get caught up by the top. It's a little bit SEO, but I did want to talk about namespaces because Steve actually originally had kind of an in-depth blog about how namespaces are secured and all that stuff. So I got a chance to kind of go through and deep dive a little bit, and yeah, it was just more interesting to see why namespaces were created in the first place, and then why they are such a wrapper for basically every single piece of functionality that's been brought into the Kubernetes ecosystem from there, right? And I find that if you're really going to understand the way security works in Kubernetes, understanding how namespaces work and how processes are separated at the kernel level is very important, especially, just things like C groups, like all your cost analysis are based off of C groups, and Google uses them to charge you, right? So there's so many different capabilities that are built off this core functionality. So I did a quick blog towards the end, which I think is the part that Steve probably found the most, you mentioned you found the most entertaining, was my little high level comment of what I think goes wrong a lot of the time, especially during early adoption in Kubernetes. And, when you're adopting Kubernetes, you tend to just follow the typical structure that you've had in place, especially within your company. So it's, development, they might be given a namespace, not even their own cluster or something like that, right? And you mentioned this, Steve, that the namespaces really should be separated by microservice or by a single application, whether if it's a front end application, it gets its own namespace, right? It has a namespace for that specific service, because as you're going to tie RBAC and network policies and volumes and things like that on top, it's going to be easy to basically do garbage collection, spin up, spin down, and be able to properly separate. And as you accrue policies, it's going to be easier to manage. So I just kind of touched on that a little bit. It is one of those weird, and I don't like the DevSecOps moments of security needs to be in the conversation of understanding how these things are going to play out as you get to scaling, because it does become kind of a mess later on. if you're not like properly structuring your cluster early.
Yep, it's a good article. It's a good article. All you gotta do when you get there is kind of do one flick, get past all that, and you're there. All the good stuff that shows up. That's pretty awesome. Because we were talking, there was an article that I think I relegated to the backlog from a previous show that I never brought back, that we started talking about, which was using namespaces as security barriers to separate front end from back end, et cetera, within a single application. And what's kind of crazy, and maybe a bad example almost, there's not a lot of microservice applications out there. You've used Sock Shop, I've used Hipster Shop. They're the same app basically, but they disregard all of that. They just go namespace, chuck it all in. So in terms of like a best practice example, maybe not the best.
Yeah, and it's also, you don't necessarily need everything to be as minimal as possible too, right? Like if it's immutable, but you can have like a decent size container with functionality that you have a team responsible for that, you can do that. With Sock Shop, I feel like they just separated everything on purpose to kind of show that they have all of the capability to separate their entire application. You don't always need to do it, right? Like you as a team, your operations, your security teams need to get together and say what makes sense in terms of how we're going to manage this and scale this, right? So just take into account the architecture of, hey, can we split this off later if it needs to be separated? And just as long as that's a consideration, then you go from there. But yeah, it's yes.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Question for you. If you want to continue on Sock Shop, I just thought there are ways that you could have used even just 2 namespaces for Sock Shop that would have been a lot better. Mm-hmm. And that would have made up for the fact that they broke every little piece out from a security perspective. But do you know of any resources that actually, other than your blog, of course, that where there are best practices for namespace use or creation, or because it's a tough one. There's a lot of tribal knowledge around about it, but I don't know where I would go.
Yeah. Kubernetes docs did have some. I remember I went a little bit in there when I was researching. I actually looked at the man pages a lot, to be honest. And like you said, tribal knowledge of just my experience working with them. I looked at the man pages and I was just like, oh, yeah, that's pretty much how you have to do it. The tough thing about writing like a blog or something of this is how you should manage namespaces is it's going to vary so much based off of your company and how your application is designed, right? It's just one of those things of you don't want to break everything up too much because then it becomes unmanageable. You don't want to have a monolith because then you're not taking advantage of Kubernetes. So it really comes down to making sure that like whatever your decision is, everything's properly labeled and the namespaces are specific for whatever that team or user is doing. That's pretty much my 2 things. If I was going to say you're going to follow something, it's like, you don't have to have every application in there. You can have multiple microservices in it, but make sure they're all labeled and they're like developed with intent as to what's coming in the pipeline. And then, if you need to move a microservice, or let's say your network policies get too complicated, then you can just, kind of pull it off, relabel, rejig the namespaces a little bit. And it's, there's an understanding of why you made the original decision. So it's easier to move forward,
Yep, I gotcha. Hey, so let me just going back to the 2 articles I had in there, which were about using user namespaces to mitigate risk. Can I be clear? Did you delete them from this section?
Yeah, my bad.
Oh my God! All right, I have them up, so I'm just going to because I'm not going into them. They're insanely long and technical. Mm-hmm. So, but there was just a few points I wanted to make before we jump into your hierarchical namespaces thing on Google, which is we could do the whole show on namespaces. But it was just what Michael was saying about actually thoroughly understanding, and you can get like a good version from the intro bit that's in your blog article. But if you want to get into the like some really interesting security scenarios, there were these 2. And if we have our spreadsheet with the links now, let's just add these links in there, because there was 2 articles that freaked me out a little bit. One from Kinvolk that came out in December on the same freaking day, like December 23rd, and then in the Netflix on December 23rd. How weird is that?
Mm-hmm.
Evolving.
It's collusion.
It's collusion. It's improving and evolving, but it's almost the same name. But they do roughly make the same points. They both call out like the runc vulnerability and how if you use Linux user namespaces to isolate runc, then you would have mitigated that risk. And they do what I liked about this one. I just want to call out if you're looking to educate yourself on it. This, of course, Netflix, right? What a surprise. Other than talking about their insane multi-tenant tightness, let's not get into that. Multi-tenancy being a nightmare of Kubernetes. But they just give you these little kernel segments that talk about, oh, if you're going to do this, in this instance, it checks to see if you have capsysadmin, does not check if you're root. So it starts isolating capability from user and then namespace from that. So it gives you the reasoning in a very, I think, succinct way as to why you can use user namespaces. This one is also good, but does a lot of complaining about how hard it is to use user namespaces for security and how they've been complaining about it since 2006. But yeah, that was interesting. So these are just good deep dives technically on how you can utilize, how you can, both understanding Linux namespaces and how you can use them. So that was I've done my bit.
Yeah,
and now I'm going to go to this line. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to expand on that a little bit because I think
do it.
When we think of something like Docker and we understand namespaces, we think of each process is sort of getting their own section. When really, when you're using something like Docker, everything underneath it is a child process, right? Like Docker or your runtime engine is the parent process. And so when you separate runc by user namespace, now you have multiple runcs. So even if you have child processes, they can't actually see the other ones because the runcs are separated by a parent process, if that makes sense, if I explain that properly.
Yeah, you did. So, and actually you paraphrased very nicely the Netflix blog there.
Yeah. And I'm fairly certain, don't quote me on this, that Fargate is basically doing the same thing. That what they did was they just said, okay, well, Docker has a parent process, Fargate is its own separate process managed by a container engine. And that's their thought of like, we can be more secure because by default, the processes can't see each other, right? The issue with that obviously is you really need to know what you're doing, because if you start building containers and you're like putting, processes in different runcs on a host, then you're not going to have the same capability. So one of those things there where security and integration does kind of slow down, I think, a lot of workflows.
Isn't Fargate fueled by Firecracker, which is sort of...
That's why I need to look at that. Don't quote me on that one. I need to look a little bit more before I assert that, but I was pretty sure that the security push from Fargate is that it's a separate, each process is a separate, like using user namespaces, so to speak. It's its own runc.
That's a whole, again, process. That's a whole other show. All right. Yeah. What is the hierarchical link you put in there? Because that's another sneaky one from you.
Yeah, so Google came out with this. What was it? I think they started introducing this a month ago. It's in beta. They've been working on it for a while, but really what they're trying to do is they realize that multi-tenancy in Kubernetes is really, really hard, especially for developers. And what they want to do is they want to give the developers the ability to go in and do whatever they want and not be hampered without actually needing cluster level access. And now you can use things like RBAC to apply your typical IAM policies in the cloud and things like that. That doesn't necessarily mean you can manage people well as groups in the cluster. And so what they're trying to look at is, how do we take namespaces, not just apply to a single person of like, you get a namespace, here's what you can do within the namespace, but we'll say, I'm going to add you to this group. This group can create 5 namespaces and it has this capability across the 5 namespaces. And really what it is it's an abstraction of those RBAC policies, just in a way that it's doing the work for you. So I think it's a pretty useful tool, especially when for developers and things like research, right? Like if I say there's a research center, this is the capability you have, these are the processes you can run. I think there's a huge upside to that. But I do think that, and we'll get into some of the demos like with Spotify, is there's a significant push to try to make Kubernetes more multi-tenant capable, so to speak. So I'm really interested in that space.
Awesome. We spent a lot longer talking about namespaces than we expected there.
Yeah, I had too much coffee today. Sorry, everyone.
Of all types. That's cool, because there's a lot to it. But moving on.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's a privacy first web. Did you know that?
It's a privacy first web. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that, actually. Yeah.
So ironic.
Yeah. So Google has basically come forward and said that they want to move away from tracking cookies as a policy. Third-party cookies, I should say, right? And a little skeptical because they're like, well, how do you make money? How do you make ad money? How do you do the sorts of things that you want if you're Google? So I found it interesting because they said first-party relationships are vital. And well, of course, you're going to have first-party relationships when 80% of web traffic gets funneled through your search engine, right? It's not 80%, but I'm just making up numbers, but it's an insane amount, right? And I put underneath the link if you want to, Steve, if you don't mind going to the next one, but there is.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah, so there was basically this this Flock API, and really what it's doing, what they're looking at is because Google, because you click on a Google search and you go into a web page, they don't necessarily need to track where you went or the rabbit hole that you went through, but they can track the time that you came back, and they can also look at what you're searching, where you're searching, what time you're searching, and they can start to build a profile of you, so to speak, and then they can start to aggregate the amount of people that are searching the same things and doing the same things. And by doing that, then they can group you and sell you as a bulk to be like, these are the profiles that fit your advertising area. They don't actually need to track what exact websites you go to. So it's one of those ways that they are technically not tracking every website you go to, but then they're also building a profile on you and going to sell that together. So I think this is just also speculation as to how they're going to use it. But
it's not working. They're taking it down. Well, put the link somewhere. You can go see it. Yeah. So they know by the fact that just by your behavior within their environment, that they should now sell you a millennial sandwich.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, millennial sandwich. That's exactly it. How much can we charge you for a mocha latte?
Yeah, this guy will pay a lot.
Yeah, a big spender.
That's funny. Yeah, that's like scary at the same time that they can just track you in combination with Google and the fact that you're using their operating system by doing it all through Chrome.
Yeah, I agree to a certain extent. If I spent the time to go and track somebody's like Facebook, LinkedIn, and all this stuff, and I really took the time to learn somebody, I'd probably be able to build a relatively thorough idea of what the person's like, right, and what their interests are. So Google's just doing it in an automated way because they can, and they're not tracking your exact browser history. So to a certain extent, I kind of like the change, as long as it's not abused, first, like most things. But
I don't think they would offer it unless they felt that this new privacy first method was going to give them the reliability in terms of targeted advertising that they need.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't do it.
Yes.
But because it does, now they get marketing as well and can say privacy first.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. That's my skeptical hat.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, so we'll try and find that PDF. It was broken down, obviously, not on a.
Yeah, it's on GitHub. I'll put it in the Excel sheet after the show. I actually have to go back and do last week's show as well, so I'll update that after today for everyone. Now we're going into
it's black. It's black, so we've got to hit the.
Yeah. You're up.
This one made me laugh. SolarWinds blames intern. Of course they do. That's a pretty smart move, isn't it? Interns are defenseless, temporary, expendable, largely. Blame the guy who's wearing a red shirt. He's gone. He's gone. And I just thought that's a little weak, isn't it? So that's why it's in the WTF. Actually, this whole website's in the WTF. Like, God, what's it doing? It's like it's auto playing all sorts of garbage I don't want. I don't want to stay here very long, so I'm not going to. All right. I'm killing it. It just keeps trying to play videos on me, and I don't want it to. With CNN.
Yeah. Don't give them that money.
CNN. No. That was horrible. That was a terrible experience.
Put all articles on the BBC. No ad.
Yeah.
Money. Come on.
Yeah. No. I got to be more careful about links we put up there.
Mm-hmm.
And given the whopping great audience we have, that's free money, right?
Oh yeah. Well, we've been doing a lot of talk about DevSecOps, and there's a push in like the CNCF to start defining these terms because,
Here we go.
teams take them and run with them. So yeah, it was just one of those conversations that had come up about SolarWinds, and it's like, yeah, you can bring in all the security tooling that you want, but if your culture is crap and you just place blame at people's feet, you're not really going to solve any security issues moving forward, right? Like people need to come to the table with their concerns. And yeah, if yeah, I've mentioned this. I think Steve's probably sick of me saying this, but I was reading a thread on Reddit, and they're like, what's the one question you asked during an interview? And the guy had a great response, and he said, if I go into an interview and I ask if I break production within 2 weeks, whose fault is it? And he says most people kind of clam up, and realistically, this should be an easy question of just like, it's 100% our fault. You shouldn't be touching production, and we need to make sure that you have the right tools before you go in there, right? Same thing. It's like you're setting passwords for accounts. Somebody needs to know about it. Somebody needs to make sure that the password is, two-factor authenticated. It can't be easily shared. So there's more to it there, and that's more of a.
Anyway, this is like an advanced persistent threat attack, right? And just to have a headline out there that blames an intern is not cool.
Yeah, I didn't actually like read the whole quote, so he might be being misquoted here. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt to be like, he might have come out and said, yeah, we found out what the issue was. The issue was an intern doing this, which could be the case. But realistically, they should have followed up with, that's a fault of mine because we need to make sure that our cultures and password, we can't be a security team and have these passwords, right? Like that should have been the follow-up. Hopefully it's there, but who knows?
Right. Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to this exciting next step. And this is some heckle fodder from our overlords. Red Hat opens the door for Windows containers. What do you think about Windows containers? How do you feel about that? How does it make you feel? Lay on the couch. Tell me.
Oh, let me think. What do the ink blots look like?
Yeah. It's like a Rorschach. You just write Windows container. How you feel?
Yeah, I've only been a part of one project of people moving Windows into containers, and I'll say that it was extremely challenging. I think that it obviously is going to be challenging. There is a need for it though, because you have large enterprises and teams that have built apps on outdated frameworks, right? And it's like, how do you get them into the 21st century? There's a use case for support. Some teams, and especially like medium-sized companies, they don't necessarily have the investment to go and say, hey, we're going to move to Kubernetes and shift our applications. Here's $2 million of investment over the next 2 years, right? And really, that's the biggest thing is like, you're going to move to Kubernetes. People are like, oh, you're going to take advantage of DevOps and you're going to make huge advances. Really, you're going to be investing a lot for probably a year or two before you start to see results. And I kind of also understand why this decision's made, because there's probably a lot of Windows people that have been looking to get into Kubernetes and do these things, and they're basically gatekept by the fact that it's all Linux, right? So yeah, it's one of those things where you understand why it's developed. You don't necessarily. It sucks if you're in a position where you have to use something like that, right?
Yeah, I guess I both sympathize, and at the same time, it feels a little bit like one of those you made your own bed kind of moments where, I don't know, a lot of the experience I have in terms of applying security controls around containers. When they say Windows containers, I have to kind of go, oh, like security in containerized applications in Kubernetes is hard enough without you chucking Windows on it, and often there's very few Windows containerized applications that are simple.
One of the great use cases I will say for something like this is if you were going to use something like Red Hat or containers or Windows containers, it should be with the goal of trying to move off it. So it's like we can't teach our programmers and operations teams and developers how to use Linux and develop a new app and use Kubernetes all at the same time. So let's get our operations team used to containers and Windows containers specifically while we keep moving our application forward, all while we're still training on the ability to be able to move off it into something else, or come up with something that's a little sleeker in design, right? There's that would, if that is the expressed intent of something like this, I think it's a really good investment.
Yeah, it does help with portability. There's loads of advantages to doing Windows containers, and it's actually pretty clever for Red Hat to allow that alongside Linux, as they say, because Red Hat actually are actually good at enabling large organizations with tons of legacy debt just to move into this space. That's probably one of the big, not one, but one of the many strengths of Red Hat. So credit there, but caveat that Windows containers drive me bonkers.
Yeah, and I mean, I have a bunch of examples of people who just start in containers and they start on Google with Cloud Run, and it's like, if you're just starting, that's the right choice, right? Like, you're going to start in containers and leverage those for speed, but once you get into organizational debt, it becomes hard. So cool.
Absolutely. All right, that was exciting.
I have we have our favorite
WTF
bit
category. Ooh, oh, we only had a few WTFs this time. Do you want me to push the button, or you want to do it?
You can do it. I'm just sitting here.
We don't have an article for it, but SpaceX crashed another rocket this morning or last night or something.
I think it was 2 days ago. They actually landed this time though, so progress.
But it was it must have been nice if you work on it, right? You're like, oh my god, we did it! Oh my god, we did it! And that those champagne corks flying. It was like 5 minutes later, it just went boom.
I would have loved to see it like a sports game. You see all the engineers just like sitting there, like holding each other back, in the launch room, and then like right before somebody's about to take a penalty kick, and then they miss, and everyone's just like,
yeah.
Anyways.
That would have been sweet. Yeah. But anyway, enough picking on SpaceX. They're doing wonderful work getting us to Mars. That's the absolutely essential stuff. Hey, there we go. Okta buys cloud security startup. Cloud security? Yeah, I guess so. Auth0. 6.5 billion. Holy crap, I hadn't realized.
Yep.
Yeah, he uses cookies. All right, great.
Yeah, it's
that's big.
Yeah, 6.5 billion is a lot, right?
I'm double taking.
But yeah, no, I mean, they're publicly traded from Seattle, right? I think how long have they been around? They've been around for almost 10 years now.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with that. What if it says here?
I think.
I don't know. Doesn't say, but I'm not gonna look it up. Yeah, I'm gonna go with 10.
Yeah, they've raised a bunch of money. They're $330 million in total venture funding, so it's pretty good return on investment right there.
Yes. Congratulations, Salesforce Ventures, Telstra, and the long list of people who have stood by them for all these years, because I'm hoping you got the return on that investment. That's pretty cool, and it's certainly an awesome move for Okta.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I think I mentioned to Steve, I think in a future episode we should look at just sort of IAM, OAuth, SAML, LDAP, maybe even go into Kerberos if we want to torture ourselves a little bit and just take a look. But
isn't that we use at Red Hat?
I
think we use Kerberos at Red Hat.
I don't know. I'm not sure, but I do. I'm not gonna. I just get accounts. I'm not gonna comment on anything like that. But I know it's. A lot of those big companies, right, are using some sort of LDAP or OAuth system. So
we want to do a comparison, or just want to maybe do a focus episode on those solutions?
Yeah, I think solutions. Right. I don't know. We'll brainstorm session coming up.
Okay, sounds good. Is this a big spender one, or are we on tools? Do we only have one big spender today?
Yeah, only one big spender. It's been slow in the security purchasing of the new year, so to speak. there's
That's
some big
true.
spenders, but
There was a huge one today, but it has nothing to do with security, so I'm not going
Mhm.
to mention it. All right, so we need a tool time jingle. Leave that with me because we still haven't got that. We got big spender covered. So tool time, yay! That's where we are now.
get like a little
And the
Bob the
first,
Builder or something like that, you know.
well, that's a good idea. All right, I'll
Hmm.
go Bob the Builder themed. Let's do this first one. I added this one in, and I we looked at you. Well, actually, you took a one-man journey through Kubernetes recently, which was fascinating. Well, it's funny, I wondered if we kicked something off there because Kubernetes showed up in like a whole bunch of my newsletters and recon, and I'm like, I had never heard of it, and then suddenly we looked at it, and now the world knows.
Mm-hmm.
So you're welcome, Kubernetes. So let's see if we can do a favor to Fairwind's cluster monitoring tool. Now, I normally wouldn't go bonkers for yet another observability tool, but they have added OPA, which is cool. But what caught my eye here, and I think exactly the same thing caught your eye, was relative total cost. Now, I don't know what's going on there, but well, it looks like I know what's going on there. I don't see a lot of tools that offer that, other than things like for cloud, like expensive solutions for cloud. Oh, not expensive actually. That great value for money solutions like Spot that monitor spending on the cloud and make sure you're not overcooking it. But that's cool that that's there.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I need to dig into it because I don't know of any other. I don't know of many other. Do you know of any other ones that are estimating like how much you're spending on workloads?
The Spotify one does too, but yeah, I mean, realistically,
Oh,
there's
yeah.
the new one, but
Yeah.
I mean, my experience with open source cost tools, it's been a lot of configured Grafana dashboards, right? That you can download and then you have to configure and change, and the maintenance of those, depending on your services, can get it's a little bit of overhead too on your operations teams. So something out of the box that has that sort of fine grain approach too. Because the other thing is, depending on your tools, it might not be sectioned properly for cost based on teams, right? So if you have shared environments and multi-tenant environments, how do I look at a team and be like, why do you need this many resources? Or like, you're not setting good caps on your services and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, otherwise, yeah, you have to configure in Grafana or use your cloud system. So
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to tell you how much you owe. So that works too.
You're going to find out. I mean, this is only just operating off Prometheus like you would for Grafana anyway, but it's just like sensible defaults that focus on things that you often have to put a lot more effort into doing. So this is next is your beauty.
Yeah, let's see if I can share my screen because
you want to grab it? Okay,
I'm on the demo already.
Yeah, do it.
So let's add to screen. Yeah, so I'm in the demo. This is Spotify's tool, Backstage, and they've open sourced it into CNCF. I believe it's Sandbox right now, and it was designed to be more developer focused. So I still haven't kind of figured out how to navigate this, and I'm assuming that there's going to be like it's a demo, but there's nothing in the this isn't installed in a cluster. There's nothing there right now. Maybe I have to put something in, but realistically, what would happen is let's say you come in, the admin says, okay, well, Foster, your team has 4 people. They're allowed these 3 namespaces, and then I go and deploy whatever I want within those namespaces. Well, they would show up here. So all the services, deployments, whatever my microservices are would show up as these are my services that I own. And what's great about that is obviously if you're in a cluster in a multi-tenant environment and I do a kube control get or something like that, and I'm trying to search through things, can get pretty hectic if you don't know how to sort and you don't have proper labeling, you don't have those proper things. So, this way I can basically go in, I can refine based off of specific tags that I set, depending on how much I'm managing. And I can look at the cost insights based off of what's been assigned to me or like what I own. So it's pretty cool. It depends on, not really sure where these numbers are coming from, but it's, again, I think you're going to see a lot in this space of projects and tools that are designed for the developer experience and multi-tenancy, specifically in Kubernetes, because it's getting as these things start to scale, if you don't have the proper tools set up, it can get pretty hectic.
So what's the so what additional infrastructure does it add so that you get your result appears to be multi-tenancy? I was looking at the docs trying to figure that out.
Yeah, and I'm not sure either. I'm assuming that you come in as an admin. If you're coming in as an admin, you have the ability to parse basically the environments out, and then whoever signs in as like to a specific group, they only see those environments that they've been sectioned to. I'm assuming it uses something like RBAC in the back end to be like, you're creating an RBAC group, and then when they come in, you assign them to that group, and then whoever's in that group, like these are the objects that you can see in Kubernetes based off that. That's my guess, but I haven't really looked too far into it.
Okay. Yeah. It does kind of look like when I looked at how to create an app that is in this space that it is creating some of the built-in templating defaults are there out of the box. This seems like a little bit like when we're talking about scaling new tools like this. Sometimes when we were talking about supply chain, as we tend to have to say every single week, getting supply chain security tools to actually work means everyone has to do it. So I wonder if there's a lot of buy-in friction associated with this. It's like certainly super cool, and if Spotify use it, then they made it so they're using it right and it works. But then to put it out into the world and have another company grab on it and use it means, well, they all kind of have to benefit from the multi-tenant part. And if any of that requirement spreads into dev, it's like security. It's how do you get them to just do it? So I think there's a struggle there. It's cool. It's a very cool idea.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of, at the end of the day, you do need developer buy-in, right? Like if the developers are okay with their workflow and operations, is managing things fine, then what you do is you just make small tweaks and you plan for scaling in the future or implementation of something in the future. But you don't need to go gung-ho and implement something. Not everything needs to be fixed because now you have, training and learning and a new tool that people can break things with, right? So yeah, I agree. It's always I in my life I've always thought that it's buy-in. It's if you can get people to buy into it and actually use it, then you get a better return on investment on these products. But
Totally.
yeah, that's a hard feat. I'll say that. And everybody has opinions on the different products that they want to, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's some famous person once said that if you fill the gap if your target market like pulls the solution you create.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a gap that frankly the people who have to do the work of the implementation, they themselves don't feel it's a gap, but they're doing it on behalf of someone else's requirement, really tough. All right, nice, but still very cool. Yeah, because we're DevSecOps, we believe. All right. What's is the JSON thing? What's next? We didn't preview that. Okay,
that one's yours.
That one's mine. All right.
Yeah, we could say it for next week. There's up to you. I'll leave it to you because it's your piece.
Why do you want to save it?
Just because you can put it at the beginning and you can rant for a little bit. You have more time.
I can rant. You know what? I probably will rant. So I'm going to skip to this last tool-based one, which was the dependency check action. And I'm going to bring it up on the screen just because. Oh, I got kicked out because there we go, because we can only have one at a time sharing. So OWASP has a dependency check, and it finds vulnerabilities in your project based on package managers, et cetera, right? It's been a free tool that's been out there as old as time itself. And somebody made a GitHub action that you can just call it, spin it up, look for dependencies. You can tell the generation that created the dependency check because they're using Maven. So they're Java people, right? So that's the package manager they're plugging into. I mentioned dependency checker in my last talk thing that I did recently, the layer cake one, because it's one of the first ones that was free and you could just get it, and it would find, and Java has a significant number of vulnerabilities in it. So I just like that somebody got off their butt and whacked it into a modern implementation, like a GitHub action. So if you are using Java and you're using Git, okay, well then this is free security and it's super easy. Just call it. That's still, I just want to call that out. It's like not exactly a big finish to our show, but when people don't have a GitHub, these like GitHub actions haven't been around that long, like a year now, right? So, yeah. But when people have a tool and they don't have an action, you're like, that's like not having a VS Code plugin almost these days, which there's not anywhere near enough of those. But yeah, so there you go. Hello, old school Java people. Go get that. Of which nobody watched this show, so.
Old school Java people. Yeah, I mean, like, just simple things. Don't overload your developers. Put it in the pipeline. You know, I had a good conversation because it's like, if it's going through a pipeline and I know it's going to take 10 minutes, if it's going to take 12 minutes because of an extra check, I don't necessarily mind. It's the constant interruption of things that I think people have issues with. So let's say I'm tripping something, I get a Slack message about it, or I'm doing something and I get this about it, right? Like it's something that you can easily implement as a GitHub action. You don't necessarily need to fail to build on it too, right? So if you're an operations person and you want to implement something like this, do it in a way that's just, an extra output, right? For now, and then get a feel for it and then see if you want to implement it, right?
Yeah. A real, off the back what you said, a really smooth way to get things get some security into the pipeline by GitHub Actions is, as you said, make sure that whoever ran it, like if it's in there, doesn't see anything disruptive. And then the people who just want to know the information get it, because there was a little bit of hyperactivity back in the day around static analysis tools for code breaking builds, and security people got all gung ho on it, and destroyed the reputation of a relatively valid method of security. So yeah, let's not do that with actions, please. Let's just create more data, more visibility.
Yeah, time and a place. Pick your policies, enforce it before testing or production or something like that. But don't break dev builds. Just let the developers do their own thing, and then you just come with a report and say, hey, there's these things that, if you don't mind, I'll help walk through, but they need to be changed before they get to production, right?
There you go. Yeah.
Things like that.
Cool.
So
definitely. All right. Awesome. Are we done? Have we done the whole list?
Yes, we're done for this week. Next week on Thursday, it's 3 p.m. Eastern. 3 p.m. Eastern, Meetup, Cloud Native. And you're going to be talking with Michael Hausenblas.
8 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. For those who have never known what GMT actually means. Yeah, that will be there. And 9 p.m. for Central European, and who knows, West Coast. We don't care about them.
But yeah, go follow Kubernetes Security Twitch for the meetup, and that's the big news I think we have.
And show up because it's an open event, and Michael's there to talk about supply chain security, something we've been going on about for weeks, essentially. And we mentioned SolarWinds and the intern. He's there to field questions. I've got a whole bunch already lined up. I did a podcast with Michael about 14 months ago, and we talked about supply chain security for half an hour. And there's we could have talked about it for 3 hours. So if you've got a question you want to throw in there, then how would they do that? How could they find out? Ping us in advance. Just sign up and show up and have your questions ready. Is that
throw it in the chat?
Yeah. So be there. Perfect. So be there on the day and throw your questions into the chat. I will be moderating, keeping things going, and keeping Michael on his toes. If you're watching this, Michael, get ready.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that's your job, is just to keep Michaels on their toes.
Anybody named Michael. That's all the only people I associate with.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for watching.
We're done. I'm Steve.
I'm Mike.
This has been another amazing episode of